Marvel already told you who Doctor Doom is. Not with a trailer, not with a casting announcement. They told you 11 years ago, in a lab, when Tony Stark looked at Bruce Banner and called the two of them monsters. Everyone laughed it off as a throwaway line. Nobody asked why the man we call a hero would say that about himself. This theory says he wasn't joking. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Doctor Strange may have let Tony Stark die for a reason nobody talks about. This is a theory, not a leak, not a confirmed twist a theory built from real dialogue, real editorial choices, and a real, very deliberate piece of MCU casting. Keep that in mind as we go, because some of what follows will sound like it's describing established fact. It isn't. It's a case. And it's one worth hearing in full before you decide what you believe. Start with what actually happened at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2024. Marvel Studios brought Robert Downey Jr. onto the Hall H stage, dressed in green and gold, and announced that he was returning to the MCU not as Tony Stark, but as Victor Von Doom, the villain of Avengers, Doomsday. The crowd chanted his name. It was, by any measure, one of the biggest surprises in the studio's history. Kevin Feige has since said the idea of putting Downey inside Doom's armor predates Marvel's problems with Kang the Conqueror. He was already talking to Downey about it before Ant-Man and the Wasp. Quantumania even reached theaters. The pivot away from Kang accelerated after actor Jonathan Majors was arrested and later convicted of assault against his ex-girlfriend, and Marvel formally cut ties with him. But according to Feige, Doom was always the endgame. Marvel had wanted this character since acquiring the film rights to Fantastic Four and X-Men from Fox, and there was only one actor they considered big enough to carry it. That's the real story. Same actor, different character. Officially, Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom are two separate people who happen to share Robert Downey Jr.'s face. But officially isn't the only version of events fans are considering. And once you start pulling at the thread the Hindi language theory videos on this topic have been pulling at, the line between different character and secret identity gets a lot blurrier than Marvel's press release wants it to be. Here's where it starts. Age of Ultron. Tony is in his lab with Bruce Banner, building the artificial intelligence that will become Ultron, and he says something strange for a man who's supposed to be the hero of this story. He calls the two of them monsters. Not scientists doing good work. Monsters. Bruce warns him repeatedly not to go through with it. Tony doesn't listen. He never listens. Ultron gets built, and the fallout levels the city of Sokovia, killing untold numbers of civilians in the process. That pattern doesn't stop there. In Iron Man 3, a brilliant, overlooked researcher named Aldrich Killian is dismissed by Tony at a rooftop party, his research on regenerative technology waved off. His invitation to collaborate ignored. Killian becomes the film's antagonist. In Spider-Man: Far From Home, a former Stark Industries engineer named Quentin Beck, who developed the barf illusion technology Tony would later use for himself, is pushed out of the company and publicly discredited. Beck becomes Mysterio, exposes Spider-Man's identity to the entire world, and sets off a chain of consequences that costs Peter Parker his aunt, his best friend, and the girl he loves. Trace it back far enough, and the root cause in every case is the same person. Tony Stark, indirectly building his own rogues gallery, one dismissed genius at a time. None of that makes him a villain by itself. He also saved the world, more than once, at real personal cost. But the theory isn't asking whether Tony did good things. It's asking whether the man doing them was slowly becoming someone else. Now here's the part of the theory that gets genuinely unsettling. What happened on Titan in Avengers: Infinity War? Doctor Strange had already looked into more than 14 million possible futures. He tells the team there's exactly one where they win, just one. And in that one future, Strange hands Thanos the Time Stone, the same stone he swore out loud to protect at any cost, even above Tony's life without a fight. The theory's claim is simple. Strange lied. Not about there being a winning future, about there being only one. Strange is a character defined by secrecy in service of the greater good. He hides things. He manipulates outcomes. And if there were multiple futures where the Avengers won, the theory argues Strange chose the one where Tony's sacrifice was guaranteed, because letting Tony live meant risking what Tony might eventually become. Think about the actual math of that final battle in Endgame. Tony has the gauntlet. He has 3 seconds, maybe more enough time for Strange to raise one finger in a signal, enough time for Tony himself to deliver a full line of dialogue before he snaps. In a battlefield with Thor, Captain Marvel, and a dozen other essentially indestructible beings standing nearby, there was time for someone else to take the stones and finish it. Nobody did. The theory's answer is uncomfortable, because Strange had already decided, 14 million futures ago, exactly who needed to not walk away from that fight. And here's where Loki Season 2 becomes relevant to all of this. At the end of Loki's first season, a being called He Who Remains reveals that he'd spent millennia pruning away every branching timeline that risked producing a version of himself, dangerous enough to restart a multiversal war specifically, timelines that gave rise to different versions of Kang the Conqueror. Season 2 ends with Loki destroying the temporal loom entirely, becoming a living anchor for the timeline himself, and setting every one of those pruned, dormant timelines free. The TVA's stated new mission afterward is to track down every variant of He Who Remains still out there. The theory's leap is this: what if one of those silenced, dormant timelines wasn't just another Kang variant? What if it was a timeline where Tony Stark survived Endgame? A reality where Strange's math went differently, where Tony lived, eventually uncovered exactly what he was always meant to become, and turned into Victor Von Doom. If He Who Remains was actively suppressing any future that threatened his own dynasty, a Tony Stark becomes Doom timeline is exactly the kind of thing worth erasing. And the moment Loki broke that system and let every dormant branch breathe again, that timeline came roaring back to life, which the theory claims is the real in-universe reason Doctor Doom is only now stepping into the MCU, wearing a face we already know. Is any of this confirmed? No. Marvel has never suggested Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom share a single drop of DNA, in this reality or any other. As far as the studio has said publicly, Downey is simply playing a new character. But it's worth sitting with why this theory has caught on the way it has. It takes real dialogue, a real pattern in Tony's decisions, and a real piece of multiversal mechanics. Marvel spent an entire season building out, and it stitches them into something that feels less like fan fiction and more like a case file. So ask yourself honestly, when Tony Stark snapped his fingers in Endgame, was he choosing to save the universe? Or was Stephen Strange choosing, on his behalf, to remove a threat before it ever had the chance to become one? Avengers. Doomsday will give us the real answer this December. Until then, this is the theory as it stands, and it's your call whether you're buying it.